All right, so let's put in our curved piece of track between two straight pieces of flex. And while you weren't looking, I added these little pieces up here. We're going to need those for the example. Now I'm going to show you how to put the track in between these 2 points here and these 2 points here. But obviously the same calculations will work for the track coming this way or the track coming this way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move these apart like this. Give us a little more working room. Now I'm just moving the track. I'm not changing the angles. Stretch this out, and I'm going to stretch this out. Now the angles that I have all of this track at, I've already worked out all the calculations in advance because it just makes it easier for me to make this video. May not make it easier for you, but it makes it easier for me. And after all, that's what life is all about. So the plan here is we're going to start by putting a 24-inch radius in this obtuse angle right here. So now, how do we get those measurements? In the real world, you probably have track connected up here and you have track connected up here, which kind of makes it hard to go and get that endpoint and see what that angle is. Now remember, the angle endpoints are going to be different when you click on the ends. This one's going to be a 6702, and this one's going to be at 247.02 degrees. But if I break the track and look up, it's 67.02, and that is all the way down. We explained that why that is. Same thing here. 121.18. So there are two ways to get the angle that we need for our track. The first one is we come over here and we look at this endpoint, and we see it's 301.18 degrees. So we would write that down because we want to find total number of degrees in this arc here. And then what we would do is we would take 360 degrees, which is vertical right here, and subtract 301.18 degrees, and we would end up with 58.82 degrees. Now we know this angle is 67.02 degrees. So we would add them together and we get an arc of 125.84 degrees. But that's not our curve here. So now we would subtract 125.84 from 180 and we get 54.16 degrees. And that is our curve to go between these two pieces. Or I could have grabbed this angle here, 67.02, and this angle down here, which is 121.18, and subtracted 67.02 from 121.18, and I would end up with 54.16 degrees. So let's take this piece of track, and we're going to curve him. So we'll curve it, and we're going to curve him to 54.16 degrees. I'm going to hit tab. It'll take us down to radius, and we want 24-inch radius. Hit enter. Now I showed you how the track curves depending on which way the handle is pointing. It doesn't really matter. So it's easy to just grab this, drag it around. So now it's kind of pointed in the right direction. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so in the time between when I recorded the original video and today, I think I found a better way to align the track. So what I did is I reset the drawing as close as I can to the other video. And I'll show you that new way. So here's our curved piece of track. And its angle is pretty close to what this is. But we can set that pretty precisely. We can come over here. We can zoom in on it a little bit. Click the end. Then come up here. And we can set our angle precisely. So we know it's 67.02 degrees. Now, when I hit enter, you'll notice this track will rotate. And there we go. And now it says it's 67.02 degrees. And we can check. We can come up here. We can click that, 67.02. We can come over here. We can click this end. We see 301.18. Come over here, 301.18. So we know this track is now properly aligned. Now, I find one thing that helps me is I add a small piece of track to either end, like that. And it just gives me a little bit more track to help align to these two pieces of track. Now we're going to grab this whole section here and we're going to move it down. And the first thing you'll notice is this curve goes behind this piece of track. This one doesn't. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come down here. It's highlighted. It's not highlighted. Highlight it. Come up here and say bring to front. And now you'll notice that everything is on top of those two pieces of track. Now with what I did before, I just brought this down and I moved it around, looking at both ends, moving it up, moving it down, until it looked like it was pretty well lined up. You can zoom in. And you can see it's off a tiny bit because you can see the darker line here. And you can do it that way. But one thing I discovered, I was thinking, yeah, this works and you can get pretty accurate with it, but it's really hard to see because everything is the same color. Now you can't change the color of the track. It's always going to be this gray. But what you can do is you can turn your track into sections. I go over this in another video, how to create section. But for right now, we're just going to make this a section. We're going to make this a section, and we're going to make this a section. Now in the real world, you're probably going to have track out here on both sides. So what you could do is you could come in and you could cut the track, create a section, and then delete the section and where you put the cut in. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to say that this is going to become a section. We'll go up here and it says create section. Now I can give it a name, but it doesn't really need to have a name now. But I can give it a color. So let's go in and let's make it red. Now you notice, much easier to see that. And just to give it a little more contrast, I'm going to do this. I'm going to select this one, hold down Control, select this one. I want to say create section. I'm going to give it a color. And now it's even easier to see. So you can come in here and you can move it around like that. You can zoom in. You can make sure, oops, grab the wrong one. You can make sure that, you're lined up pretty good. All right, that's all fine and good. And that looks nice. But there's something you can do to make it even better. Remember way back when I had you put in this shortcut up here for center line. Right now we're looking at track, which means we're looking at the full width of our track. If I come up here and I do center line, now look what we've got. Now I've got really thin lines here. And if I zoom in, you can see, if I grab it and move it, I can move it until I don't see any green under that red. I come over here now. It actually looks pretty darn good. Let me zoom out again. I'm going to move this guy out. I just want to show you something. When I select an item, I can use the up, down, left, right arrow keys to move that. And each time I click an arrow, it moves a small amount. Exactly what that small amount is, I'm not sure. But you can use your up, down, left, right keys to move that around. And that can sometimes come in handy when you're trying to nudge a piece of track around. So let's try and move this guy back into place. So we'll bring him down here. And we'll bring him here this way. And you just sort of keep going back and forth and back and forth. Zoom in a little bit. Let's lose that. And let's lose that. So we have a little bit more room to work. So as you can see, I got a little bit green showing up here. And it looks pretty good on this side. Now if I nudge it with the arrow key, it pushes it a little bit too far. Now I'm off over here. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to grab this, bring him up, bring him over. As you can see, just keep moving around until it looks good. Zoom in a little bit. I am off there. Come down. Zoom in over here. That looks really good there. All right. So now I think I have my track aligned. Now I can check this by doing this. And it might be easier to see if we go back to track. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select this piece of track down here. I'm going to grab the end. I'm going to pull it back and I'm going to connect. I'm going to hover over it and I'm going to look down at the bottom and see if I see any curvature in it. If there's any curvature, it will say R minimum. And if you look there right now, that is a straight piece of track. Let's look at the other side. Let's go select this guy. Pull him back, pop him on, hover over. That is a straight piece of track. So I got that perfectly aligned between my two angled tracks. Now in my earlier video, I didn't get it precisely aligned because I wasn't using that center line method, and I ended up with a radius of 13,136 inches or thereabouts on one side. And on the other side, I had like 8,000 inch radius. Both of those, I don't think you're going to notice. It was essentially a straight piece of track. But as you can see, by going to center line, you can get it aligned pretty accurately. Okay, now that we have aligned our track, we need to remove those sections. Let me point out one thing here. When you put in a section, it adds an isolator to either end. And the reason it does that is because it's thinking you want to make an electrically isolated section. So the first thing we'll do here is we'll come over here and we're going to select this section. And you'll see up here, it comes up and it says remove selection. So I'm going to click on that. And now we're back to our gray track. But we still have our isolator. Now we want to remove these two pieces of track as a section. So I'm going to select that. But you'll notice that it didn't select this guy. When I selected this guy, it also picked up the two little end pieces that we had as part of the section. But this time it didn't. And I believe the reason is that this piece and this piece were never connected. So just hold down Control, select both of them, come up here, say Remove Sections. Now we can take out the isolator by right-clicking on it, say Remove Isolator. Do that on both ends. Now we have these two little pieces here still. You could leave them in. I mean, it's not really going to affect anything, but if you want to clean up your drawing, you could take those out. We'll highlight them, hit delete. And now we're just going to move this end down here. And let's see what happens. Sometimes it adds a bit of radius to the track. Let's see if it did this time. Nope, still says it's a straight piece of track. Do the same over here. I can do this freehand because it's just going to snap to here. Hover over it. Nope, still thinks it's a straight piece of track. Okay, so let's go back to the original video where we're putting in a curved piece of track in an acute angle. And I'm not going to re-edit that part of it and show you how to create sections and then use center line, change the colors and all that. I'm just going to let it stay the same where I was using the older method of aligning the track. So that's a way to cut in your curve into an obtuse angle like that. So let me reset and we will do it on an acute angle. Okay, so we've reset the drawing pretty much back to where it was at the beginning. Let's zoom out. What we're going to do is we're going to put a 24-inch curve in this area here. So obviously we're going to have to extend this piece of track out. And it's a 24-inch radius curve, so we're going to need a little bit of room here. Let's do that. Now, let's grab that and we'll move it over. Gives us a little more working room over here. Now, a lot of the angles we're going to be working with for here, pretty much the same as up here, but we're going to start from the beginning because we want to show you how to do this section right here. So what we need is we need our angle here, and we can just cut into that and grab it. And we get 121.18 degrees. So write that down. And we need our angle up here. So we'll cut it, and we get 67.02. Now we're going to subtract 67.02 from 121.18, and we end up with 54.16, same as our curve up here. But now we want to subtract 54.16 from 180, and we end up with 125.84 degrees. So our curve is going to be 125.84 degrees. Now, you can only bend a piece of flex track 90 degrees, and we need 125.84. So what we have to do now is we're going to divide 125.84 by 2, and we end up with 69.92 degrees. So let's curve this piece of track, and we're going to curve it to 62.92, tab, and a 24-inch radius. Hit enter. So we're going to need 2 of these. So we'll do a Control-C, come down, do a Control-V, put them together. We're going to drag this guy up here. We're going to zoom in on the end. And we're going to come up here, and we're going to set this end to this angle. And we know this angle is 6702. So we're going to put in 67.02, hit enter. And it's now rotated that piece of track to the proper angle. And if we pull this up here, we come down here, we can check our math. Click on that. We have 121.18 degrees. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We'll grab a piece here. We'll grab a piece here. We'll go to center line, grab it, and start moving it around until we get it to line, just like we did on this curve. You'd probably want to make this a little bit larger. In reality, you'll have track out here, and you'll have track out here. You just keep moving it around until it lines up. Eventually, it'll line up. You can check. You can move your ends back down, connect them, and check and make sure that you've got a ridiculously large radius curve, and it pretty much is going to be a piece of straight track for you. Now, these same calculations will work if you want your track to go this way or you want your track to go this way. Let's put this back to track because it just looks cooler. Okay, so there's 2 ways to put in a piece of curved track between 2 straight pieces of track. Now, the way I've calculated the angles works for me and always seems to work. Every example that I set up, it worked just fine. And when I've been designing my track plan, it seems to work just fine. Now, there might be those of you out there who know a lot more about math than I do and say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I know that the way I did it here does indeed work. So if you have a better way or a simpler way, let me know, and we'll incorporate that into the video. And like I said at the beginning of the video, you may never have to put a curve into your layout this way, but it's nice to know how to do it in case the need arises. Oh, and what was that change that they made in August that caused me to re-edit videos? Well, they said you could get the angle of a piece of track by highlighting it and then looking up details in the drop-down menu. Or at least that was the way I read the update. So let's take a look at that. Now we need to add a piece of track, so we'll go up here and we will get our track library. And we're just going to pull in a piece of flex like this. I'm going to drag it down here, and you'll see why in just a second. So now we know when a piece of track comes in, it comes in horizontally, and this left-hand endpoint is at 90 degrees. And the right-hand endpoint is either going to be at minus 90 degrees or 270 degrees. So let's take a look at the details in the drop-down menu. Here it is. It's at the very bottom. Now here are the details on that piece of track. And what endpoint comes up first seems to vary. I think it has to do with where your mouse is when you click details. In this instance, the right-hand point has come up first, as you can tell by the 96 inches on the X-axis. And right now, it's telling us that endpoint is at 106 and 5/16 degrees. And if you look at the left-hand endpoint, it says it is at 35 and 7/16 degrees. So these numbers here, they don't make any sense to me at all. If you have any idea what's going on, please let me know, because it could be that I misread the update. Now, personally, I think that when you click on a piece of track or hover over it, the angle should be displayed down here at the bottom with all the other track information. It already shows you the track number, the code size, and the length of the track. So why not show the angle too? I don't know, just my thoughts on that. Well, that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next.